This episode of The Candid Frame is brought to you by Storytellers Workshops. Founded by photographers Doran Seguin and Gail Fisher, the workshop offers a photo experience unlike any other in Provence, France this summer. You'll enjoy an intimate photographic and cultural experience while learning how to turn your photography into a publishable photo story. Find out more by visiting storyteller-workshops.com. Martin Parr is a photographer that has influenced generations of photographers, not only in his native England, but around the world. His photographs of British culture over the decades are not only examples of street and documentary photography, but prove that choosing subject matter that's familiar and close to home can have a significant impact anywhere in the world. However, the way he sees the world has not been relegated to a single genre of photography, as his latest book, Fashion Faux Pas, demonstrates. This book collects Parr's unique take on the world of fashion over the years that builds on his signature look that aptly combines an examination of the unusual and the mundane, and often with a sense of humor. This collection is not a departure for Parr, but an extension of his eye and his point of view. This is Ibarian X, and welcome back to The Candid Frame. Well, Martin, thank you for your flexibility and your understanding. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to finally have a chance to speak with you.
Good, thank you. Good to be here.
Excited about the new book. But I kind of, before we get into discussion about the work, kind of like wanted to go back. One of the things I've heard you talk about was growing up in Surrey, was that when you went to visit your grandfather, that you were struck by the sense of community that you saw there. And I'm curious to hear more about what you observed there in terms of community. What did that look like to you?
Yeah, first off, you have to understand Surrey is a suburb of London, and it's really the sort of what we call the home counties. This is where people live that commute into London. So it's boring because there's lots of houses, not much character, bit of countryside nearby. But compared to Yorkshire, where the scenery is so much better, the terrace houses are really interesting. All the shops and all the people we met in there, courtesy of my grandfather, who was a real pillar of the community. I was really taken by this and thought this is so much nicer than where I was brought up.
So was it that in where you were growing up in Surrey, that it was very insular, that there wasn't that much interaction between groups?
Obviously, I had friends, built around going to school and such like. But you're right, there wasn't that sense of community. You didn't have a local shop you could go to where they would know your name. It just was, it was sort of indifferent, really. But I've always accepted that that's been a good thing for me, because it means, when I get a smell of a sense of community, as in the case in Yorkshire, it's very inspiring to me. It was back then, and it still is now.
I've been observing that now it seems that even in a more urban community, there's this sense of isolation that people have, especially after the pandemic, that there's a tendency to people to want to be more insular in their homes. And at least personally, even in Los Angeles, it seems like it takes much more effort for public and social interaction than it was before.
I don't quite agree with that, because, for example, where we live now in Bristol, we're in a terrace of 12 houses. And when COVID came along, we started a WhatsApp group. We kept more in touch, and that's continued since. So I think you'll find here, certainly in the UK, where people were, living with their neighbours, they got together more and got to know each other better through COVID than the other way around, which is what you're suggesting.
With your parents are avid bird watchers, and
that's right.
And that sort of you said that a level of obsession goes with that, but there's also a practice of careful observance, and I'm wondering whether that, in combination with the sort of obsession, helped to sort of refine the way that you look at the world, and hence how you tend to photograph.
I always credit my father for passing on his obsessive genes. He would be up at the weekend, the same time as you, going out, putting up the nets that he would catch the birds in, spotting them, putting little rings on them. He got very excited by the migratory birds that came into the UK and the other way around. So, yeah, he was an obsessed bird watcher. I mean, I believe that you have to be obsessed with anything that you intend to make a career of. Otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere, basically. So I think it's an automatic that you've got to be obsessed. Otherwise, there's no point in even starting.
Do you feel like that his observing his ability to observe was something that you drew something from beyond, the tendency to have to be obsessive?
I didn't actually think of it like that. I mean, I can look at it now more in hindsight and say that, his ability to, to observe and do all these things has had an impact on me. But no, I wouldn't definitely connect them so strongly as you're suggesting.
When did the camera start playing a role? I know that you learned some from your grandfather, but when did it really sort of become something that you felt you wanted to do as part of your life?
I think when I was 13 or 14, I'd made that decision. And then, of course, I got a camera. And by 15, 16, I was starting to shoot pictures for the school magazine, doing pictures just generally. And, really building up a momentum and thinking, right, I'm definitely going to go and study photography at college. That would give me the opportunity to learn a lot more and hopefully launch myself as a photographer.
When you were in college, would you say that was really an essential part of your growth process? It often is for people in terms of sort of finding their voice, their visual voice. Was that for you?
No, for sure. It gave me an opportunity to start expressing myself through photography. I started to do some long-term projects in my second year, and more importantly, I think I met a peer group. And I'm still together friends with people like Daniel Meadows and Brian Griffin, who is a very important friend of mine who just died 2 weeks ago, in fact. He and I became best friends immediately. He was in the year above me, and we loved and were obsessed with photography in a way that you have to be. And immediately we spotted this in each other. And I think that was as inspiring as, say, the actual staff that we had.
One of the challenges when you're a young photographer is feeling confidence in your own personal approach, especially if you're not seeing it reflected in the work of others. The tendency is to want to, let me do what other people are doing because that seems to be the right thing to do. Tell me about your journey in terms of finding your approach, your sensibility, and having the confidence to stick with it.
I mean, I was always quite confident, to be honest, in photography. I sort of had a feeling that I had a natural ability in that direction. And I think in the second year, when I did a substantial project on Prestwich Mental Hospital, which is somewhere I'd visited with a friend of mine and thought, this is interesting, I'd like to come back here and do more work. They gave me permission. And I then spent weeks on weeks photographing in there. In fact, the college tutors said I shouldn't spend so much time. But, for the first time, I had a proper statement through photography about how I saw the world. And I guess that gave me a lot of confidence as well, because I realized that I was really onto something. And those pictures today, still look pretty good when I look back at them. They've been published in a zine, and they've been seen, and you can see them on my site.
What did you see in those photographs yourself that you felt when you looked at them? Yeah, I'm onto something, and it's different from what you may have done before.
I think it's the ability to connect with the subject. That sense of connection you have is very important, and it's the quality of that connection which I think can be reflected in not only my work but in other photographers' work. When you look at it, when you sense that something is really happening, that's when the magic starts to sort of happen in photography. It's not automatically. It's not God sent. You have to sort of work at it. And I think you're making discoveries about your way of depicting this and your way of reflecting your relationship to the world.
There are a lot of photographers who sort of identify themselves as being, shy and maybe a little bit socially awkward, and that the camera provides them sort of permission to move past that. Your work is a lot about social, about personal interaction to a great degree, even if you're working with just total strangers. Would you say that's that sort of shyness, reticence to socially interact is part of your story, and that the camera provides you an excuse to surmount it?
Yeah, I think the camera is a great excuse to go out into the world and to meet people. You can walk into a shop and say, I'd like to take a picture in here. And immediately, usually people say yes, and you've got a reason to be there. So I think that part of photography is very important. I mean, sometimes I've had relationships with people that I've photographed to be quite close, and sometimes, as you mentioned, I don't meet people at all. So I'm at a tourist location. I've done a lot of work around tourism over the years, and when you go to something like that, you don't necessarily meet people because everyone's got a camera, everyone's now got a selfie phone, and I'm here with my bigger camera, and no one really bats an eyelid because we all understand that when you go to these places, you've got to have a camera with you. Usually it's your smartphone that people drag out, but a bigger camera is also acceptable.
In looking at the images in the book, which is largely a collection of your fashion work, it strikes me that there's a certain irony to the work, because when you think about the work that you did for the project, The Last Resort, one of the things you're famous for, and some of the work that you did subsequently, that it was sort of a direct reaction to the commercialism, to the politics of the time. As you've said it so about yourself, that you were both being a critic and expressing some of your anger for the way things were, and do you see some irony in that, the fact that at some point the fashion industry, which is very about commercialization and marketing a product, that they looked at your work and suddenly say, wow, what was once considered ugly and caustic is something we want to embrace?
No, I think you're right. I mean, obviously, I got my first fashion shoot way back in 1999 because an Italian art director had seen my work and thought it might be interesting to, invite a documentary photographer to do fashion. And that proved to be quite successful. And I think the same language and palette that I'd built up in my color documentary work could be applied to the fashion industry quite easily. And what people do when they get in touch with me, they say, we want Martin Parr pictures. And of course, that's the one thing I can always take. But within the fashion industry, there is some mischief there. I mean, I'm sort of slightly taking the piss out of the fashion people, even though I'm part of it now to a certain extent. I keep thinking I'm not, but I know ultimately the very fact that I got this book out means that I'm part of it. But I say the trend that I maybe was doing back in the late 90s is still very much here. There's a whole wealth of photographers now who are basically doing documentary photography but paying for their living or earning their living through fashion photography. People like Harley Weir, Jack Davidson. There'll be many more names in America that I wouldn't know about, but I'm sure they're there. So that sort of wall between documentary and commercial fashion is slowly evaporating.
You've produced many, many books, largely in the documentary tradition. This book, how is this book different in terms of compiling, in terms of culling and editing and putting this together as compared to some of the other books that you've done where it's often tied by a narrative?
I don't think it's so different, really. The last book that I did, which had a lot of my own work in, was called Only Human. That came out in 2018, I think, or 2019. And that was also done with Phaidon. And that was very much looking at more recent work that I'd done in the documentary mode. And we use the same principle there to select the work as I did in the fashion book. We got all the pictures out, put them on the table or looked on them on a screen, and slowly made edits and brought the work down to a manageable number. And then with the help of the designer, narrated it, got the right sequence and put it all together. So I don't think the process that I went through in making this book was any really different to other books that I've done where there's more than one project.
What from having produced so many books, what do you think that you've learned that is essential towards creating a book that you consider successful? Not in terms of sales.
I guess first off, you have to have decent pictures, and you have to have a theme running through the book, whatever it may be. And here, obviously, the theme is quite simple. It's just the fashion work that I've done over the years. That's it, really. It's very straightforward.
Your images often, revolve around just the brilliant use of color and light, whether you're using strobe or not. And, you've been photographing. When you're photographing for decades, it just becomes an innate part of how you see. But when you look at the work, especially when you go back to consider them for publication in the book, do you have moments of rediscovery when you take a look at your own work, especially work that you've done years before as compared to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think I did. I mean, obviously, everything is loaded onto the Magnum site as it's done. And everything's keyworded, so fashion would be one of the words that would be applied. And I remember when we first decided or talked about doing a book about fashion, I put that into the Magnum site, and up came all these pictures, many of which I'd forgotten I'd taken. And that's definitely the case with the book. Some of them I hadn't looked at twice since they were taken maybe 10, 15 years ago. But I think I've done a lot of fashion in the last few years. And especially with brands like Gucci and Balenciaga, so they're really the top people. So this, in a sense, also inspired me to think now's the time to bring out a book with all these pictures in.
One of the funniest collections in there is when you were photographing pieces of very expensive jewelry at what we would call a swap meet. Basically a place where people buy, used knickknacks and things like that. Goods. And you were juxtaposing them against a teddy bear or a rocking horse. Tell me about that. That idea, because I thought it was such an odd pairing.
Well, obviously, when I'm working, someone tells you, we want you to do an accessory shoot. And all the time I'm thinking of where can I do this? It's interesting and different. And the swap meet just came along as one of the ideas. I ran it past, it was for Vogue, in fact. I ran it past them. They liked the idea. It turned out to be, a very good backdrop to squeeze in all these different things that Vogue had sent me.
Some of the images that I found most interesting is where the presence of the fashion, whether it was the outfit or the accessory, was less obvious. It was thrown into the midst of an ordinary scene where the fashion itself wasn't prominent, and you really had to linger on the image longer in order to discover what that was. And I found that very interesting because fashion is often about, spotlighting whatever the clothes are, or whatever the shoes are, or the accessories are. I really loved those photographs, and it was really sort of interesting to approach fashion in that way, where you're not spotlighting it. Was that?
Yeah, no, I think that was that's one of the ideas that I had, is to sort of build it into contemporary life and put it into a situation, whether it's a supermarket or whatever I've done. Every time I do a new shoot, I'll take it to a different situation where normally fashion isn't taken. So the one I did, say 2 weeks ago, which is the last fashion story I did, was for Numero Homme in France, and we went to a gym. And we had 2 models, and we dressed the models, and they went out and did their exercises. Sometimes other people in the background, and they're just integrated into the scene. So it's all sort of plausible. I want to make the fashion pictures more plausible, really.
And it also just allows you to make your kinds of pictures as well, because you're fitting it into the way that you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, absolutely. Because obviously, you get quite well paid to do fashion shoots, and you're having a lot of fun, basically, and you create things, you move things around. Most of my life, I spend, having to accept what's in front of me as being the best I can do. And if I started to move people, it wouldn't be right, So you go with the flow. In the fashion world, you can move as many people as you like. And that's a lot of fun. And that's a lot of freedom that you get. And then you could make pictures that, as I say, I think being plausible is the right word. And that's something that's fun to do and something I aim to sort of create.
You said earlier that they hire you because they want Martin Parr photographs. And now they desire you for that. But early on in any photographer's career, when they are making their work, they may not be as easily embraced for their sensibility and their style. And there can be moments of great self-doubt in terms of, am I doing the right thing? Right. Should I just follow a trend in order to make sure that I keep food on the table and a roof over my head? What was that? What was that like for you? And how did you make sure to press on and stick to what you knew worked for you?
Well, obviously you have an intuitive sense as to what is right, A, for you to do, and B, how to make a picture. The great thing is, for example, going back to that swap meet, we turned up in the morning. I looked around the place, immediately recognized a few locations. And then, the art director was there as well. We went together and we tried different combinations. And between us, we'd work out where the best picture can potentially emerge from. And that's a lot of fun, that process. So we don't actually know what we're going to shoot before we get there, apart from the fact that we've got a bag full of 20 accessories and we need 10, 12 pictures. So that's great fun. I love solving problems with photography. And that's exactly what you do here, because my obligation first is to make an interesting picture, because that's the only way I'm going to survive as a photographer. And then secondly, having the jewelry item in it perched potentially on something that might be funny, might be ironic, might be complete anti what's in the backdrop. All those things can be played out, and it's a lot of fun. So I enjoy it. I end up laughing when I'm doing these pictures.
Have you ever come back from your travels wishing your photos could do justice to the wonders you encountered? What if they could look more like stunning National Geographic photo stories? This might just be your chance. What if you could learn those skills in October on an epic trip to the heart of Provence, France, from two world-class professionals? One is an award-winning French-American photographer who knows Provence intimately, and the other, a senior photo editor at National Geographic and the Los Angeles Times. I'm talking about Dotan Segui, who has been a repeated guest on the podcast and started storyteller workshops with his distinguished colleague, Gail Fisher. Dotan, who is a French native speaker, is offering to take you off the beaten path, share his secret photography spots, and provide access to the fascinating local culture of Provence. Gail will teach you to approach your travel shoots the way a Nat Geo pro would, as a visual storyteller. You'll even get to learn to make your own photobook of the trip, and will get your photo story published in a major photography blog upon your return. This epic 8-day workshop takes place October 26th through November 4th. It includes everything so you can learn in total cultural immersion: a gorgeous 4-star hotel, a carefully curated selection of Dotan's favorite restaurants, and a level of personalized instruction only possible in a very small group. There are 10 spots in total with 2 instructors. Only 6 spots are still available. Visit storyteller-workshops.com for more info and email Dotan directly at dotan@me.com with your questions. One of the things that I'm proud of when it comes to the Candid Frame is that I didn't need to change it to a focus on gear in order to make it successful. I did enough of that work as a writer and an editor back in the days when I worked at photography magazines. From the very beginning, I wanted this show to focus on conversations about what it means to choose a life revolving around photography. I wanted to learn and share the variety of ways there are to lead a photographic life. It was something that I needed to hear, and it seems that many of you wanted it too. That idea is still at the core of the show after all these years, and I'm glad that it resonates with so many. Your donations over the years have made it possible for me to stick to that mission, and it's your contributions that will help us to maintain that course going on into the future. So please consider becoming a Patreon supporter today and helping to make that happen. You can contribute $5, $10, $20 more a month by visiting patreon.com/thecandidframe. Again, it's patreon.com/thecandidframe. And now if you only want to make a one-time donation, you can do that by going to buymeacoffee.com/thecandidframe. You just said something very, very interesting to me, that it was the problem solving that was important. And to my thinking, a photographer who is a better problem solver than they might be a photographer is often a good thing to be, because there can be some amazing, talented photographers who may not necessarily be able to solve the problems, and the likelihood that someone will want to hire them or rehire them, that becomes the arbiter about which one they choose.
I can't disagree with that. You're right. You're making statements, and I can agree with them.
Where did you find that early on in your career that your ability to solve a problem was really, really key? Do you have an example of that?
I guess, remember, I'm also doing that with documentary photography. So going back to The Last Resort, that's what really launched my career beyond the UK. It was shown in France initially, and then it got shown in Germany. And, a lot of people sort of came to me after seeing that work. And then I applied, again, that language that I basically had stolen from the commercial world of, bright colors, often with flash, the saturation that color negative would give you with flash. That was all one that I applied to the documentary work. And then I got a lot of editorial assignments immediately after that. And then it took maybe another 10 years before the fashion thing landed on my plate. That was 99, but The Last Resort came out in 86. So between 86 and 99, I was doing a lot of editorial work. And indeed, I continued to do that after my first foray into fashion. And again, you are solving problems with photography. You see an event in front of you, you see things happening, you've got to make a picture. And often when you go away from that scene, you realize that you didn't get it, you didn't capture it. When you're there, you're always thinking that you are doing that. But it's very easy sometimes to not catch the essence of the thing that's going on in front of you and your relationship to it.
You said about that your efforts with the camera often, failure is a big component of it. Regular and consistent failure.
Yeah.
But
I fail a lot. I'm very good at failing. And I have to take a lot of very bad pictures in order to get a few good ones. If you went out and said, I'm only going to take good pictures today, you'd never start, because they're so rare, they're so elusive. And when they come up, you don't really know how or why they did. So that's all part of the fun and part of the frustration. And that's what keeps me being a photographer, because you never quite understand how and why a good picture may emerge.
What lessons did you learn from looking at your failures?
Yeah, you realize that doesn't work, and you've got to keep on going. I think you learn more from looking at your successes. If, let's say, I get 8, 10 good pictures a year, which is quite optimistic, that's what you learn from. Because why is it one picture will have a sort of element of magic in it that makes it go beyond just its normal documentation of what's in front of you? That's the issue that you have to sort of deal with. And often when you go away and you look at when you go back and edit it, you realize you have failed to capture that. I mean, you'll have work there that will have some value because just the very fact that you're recording something in front of you, an event or a place or a time, whatever it is, that has documentary value. But of course, I'm interested in something more precious than that, more one that really sort of is going to stand out as a photo. And also, these are the photos that sell. And remember, half my income is coming from print sales. So, it's important to come up with iconic images that people are interested in buying and investing in.
Because you revisit your archive and you go back to your older images, both shot on digital and film, do you occasionally rediscover an image that you thought was a failure, and then you realize, oh, that actually was a successful photograph?
Yeah, no, that does happen. I'm also doing a book about the UK, which is part of the Louis Vuitton series on different cities and countries. And that's coming out at the same time. And in that, there's a few pictures which the sort of art director had discovered on the Magnum site that I'd entirely forgotten about, which I quite like when I look at them again. So yes, the ability to reappraise your work is something that's interesting, and something that occasionally comes up with a picture that you'd rejected that someone else has spotted, and it turned out to be quite good.
Not so long ago, you had some health challenges, and you had to get around on a scooter. And I'm wondering whether or not, I don't know if you were shooting much at all when you were on there, but I was curious if you were, whether that limitation provided you a useful perspective when it came to image making.
I think so, yeah, because since I've been diagnosed with myeloma, which is a cancer of the around your back basically, and the fluids in your spine. It's made me more determined to take more pictures. Because I know I'm not going to be here forever, so it gave me a sense of urgency. And I often take pictures. I go around with a scooter, then walk off and take pictures. I can park the scooter and go and take the pictures. It's when I get my backache. It's after standing after, say, 10 minutes. And then I get back on the scooter and go forward. I also have a sort of manual rollator as well, which I use a lot. So, it's quite, it's made me more determined to try and do more shooting. So I think I did more pictures last year than I've ever done previously in my time in Magnum. Because, I count them literally, the number of pictures I'm loading onto the site.
Oh, wow. The change in perspective of being seated as opposed to just standing upright lead to different discoveries?
Well, I'm seated. I take pictures from the seat, and also I take pictures when I'm off the seat and go and walk around. I think it's not so much that perspective. It's just thinking, I can still take pictures. The year before, I wasn't really able to take pictures because I was so unwell. So I'm just relishing, this opportunity to keep on shooting.
Tell me about the foundation, about the idea for it and the creation of it, because that's a big part of your life, not only for your archive, but that of other photographers.
Yes. So I'm sat here now in the foundation. Yeah, it started in 2017, and the main purpose of it was to give a platform to, and to show and to collect and acquire and have the books of other British documentary photographers. So we do exhibitions. We have 4 shows a year. We have a huge archive of prints, not only looking after my own sort of archive of prints from my past, but also collecting book dummies and prints of other British photographers. And that's it. We have seminars, we have programs, we have a membership, which we have over 500 members. And, we have a lot of events where we have photographers speaking. And we have a very healthy bookshop. We've got a lot of books, many of which are signed. And it's going very well. I'm very happy. And, I often, like this week, I won't be taking so many pictures. I was working yesterday, but I'll be in here, I'm doing a lecture later this week and, working with the staff here as to how we can move forward and put forward a new season of events.
It seems that some of the work there is being able to promote the work and conserve the work of people whose work you've admired and appreciated. How important has that been to you in terms of the work of the foundation?
Sorry, ask that again.
No, because you're able to serve other photographers as a result.
That last bit I missed.
You're able to serve other photographers.
Sorry, I missed that again.
Can you hear me?
Yes. No, that's
Yes.
very important because I've been very lucky. You know, I've been a photographer that's had a good career. I've done very well through Magnum, and it's given me the cash to sort of, to buy the work of other photographers who I know are basically underrepresented, underappreciated, and this is all part of, hopefully, making a collection that will be there forever, and also acknowledging their contribution to the whole photography scene here.
Is there a recent addition to the collections there that you're particularly proud of?
Well, we're constantly buying work, So currently we have an exhibition about the miners' strike in the UK, which is a very important event that happened in 84, 85. I mean, in America, you wouldn't really know about it, but it was the most, dynamic strike, most difficult, angry strike that we've ever had in this country. So we looked around and found other photographers that had photographed this event, like John Sturrock, John Harris, and Brenda Prince, and we've brought their prints in and acquired some, and now they're all up in the exhibition gallery. And it's been a very popular show because the miners' strike was such a huge event here. You can never underestimate how big and important it was.
You said that you make a good amount of your income from your print sales. Tell me about how that works for you in terms of the selections of what prints become available and how they're chosen and how you choose.
But I have quite a few. I have quite a few dealers around the world. I've got. I guess the main one is France. I've always been very popular in France. So I'm with Clementine de la Feronia. She's doing an exhibition of my fashion work at the end of March, and likewise in America, I'm with someone called Janet Borden in New York. She's also doing a fashion show in the same period, and also there'll be a fashion show in Tokyo at the same time, also in a commercial space. And we basically, I guess, over the years, I've sold quite a lot of prints. What can I say?
You said that the French seem to.
I've been very lucky.
You've said that the French and probably other countries have had a greater appreciation for your work and your sensibility outside of your own country. What's that about?
Yes, I think they like the fact that I'm sort of pulling the leg of the English to a certain extent.
Do you find that that's the case outside of France as well? Let's say in the UK or maybe Asia or South America?
Well, France is such a bigger country for photography than the UK. I mean, you can never really spell out how different it is there. And their appreciation of photography in general. They have the two biggest photography events, Paris Photo, which is huge, and, the Arles Festival, which is also, the most important festival, probably, still in Europe. So you can never underestimate how important, French society and their appreciation of photography is. And they're particularly interested in British photography. They like to see it. And I'm very happy that's the case. And in fact, Clementine will be coming to APAD with my fashion work as well. So that's pretty soon. I don't know when your thing goes out. Probably, is it after APAD's in April, isn't it?
I'm not sure, but this will probably be out before then.
Yeah.
What about today's culture? We've touched on it a little bit, but what about today's culture intrigues you that makes you think of projects or a focus that you would like to pay attention to with your camera going forward?
Well, I guess my main subject matter has always been photographing here in the UK. And over the years, I've done different projects about the UK, looking at different sections of society, different things going on. And I have a sort of really strange relationship to the UK where I love it and hate it at the same time. I mean, I was very upset by our departure from Europe. And, but at the same time, that sort of makes me angry about my compatriots. At the same time, I love what they do. I love having a cup of tea. I love going to a Highland show. I love going to a church fete or anything really that's going on and taking more pictures. I can never get enough.
How often are you able?
So I think my relationship and the contradiction of that relationship has been the thing that's driven me forward, really.
As we get older, we tend to get more sentimental. Do you feel that that anger and that is tempered a little bit by sentimentality?
No, for sure. I mean, the anger I had when I was young and did The Last Resort is definitely muted. So I'm much more gentle these days.
But
so you're right. I hope I'm not too sentimental. I make sure that's not the case.
I think that a bit of cynicism is helped to be tempered by a little bit of, if not nostalgia, there's a little more compassion mixed in every once in a while.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll accept that.
When you're working with young photographers, they're eager to learn from you. They're often looking at you for advice. But when you think of yourself as a young photographer starting out, what do you think was the most important thing that you needed at the time to hear or to learn?
I didn't really I met people from my own peer group, but I didn't go around and actually find a mentor from an older photographer, actually. So that never really happened with me. It's just, I had my peer group. I talked to them. I got inspired by them. And, I guess I learned from my peers rather than from my mentors.
Was there a sense of competitiveness amongst you that helped as well?
I guess there's always going to be a bit of that around. But, part of my job here is to sort of help other photographers. And I've made that, very much part of what I've done in terms of when I've curated shows. I don't know if you know, but Jerry Badger and I did this whole series of books about the history of the photobook. Are you aware about that?
No,
Have you seen those books? Yeah, they were also published by Fiden. So they've been very important. And many of the photographers there were photographers that have been forgotten. And we were able to sort of resurrect their careers by that process of looking at their books and celebrating how good they were when they'd been sort of forgotten. So, someone just walked in. No problem. So yeah, that's an important part of what we do here as well.
Well, I share your love of photo books, though I'll never accumulate as many books as you did. God knows. I already spend too much money on books than I likely should, but they bring me great pleasure.
Right.
But to talk to me about the importance of books in your life, why you have such an affection for creating.
Well, I think the book is the ultimate vehicle. Yeah, but the book's the ultimate vehicle for a photographer. You get the pure statement, and it's not thrown away. So shows come and go, and magazines come and go. The internet, you see it first, and then it's forgotten. Whereas a book will always be there, and it'll always be, it won't be thrown away. That's the important thing about it. And all photographers want to make books, so it is the ultimate statement. And sometimes books take years to accumulate, and sometimes books happen very quickly.
Yeah.
Both are legitimate. Yeah, I'm sitting in a library here. I've got my back to the curtain, but I'll give you a spin round. You can see.
Oh, my God. That's pretty extensive. That's a library.
5,000 books in this room alone, all around the corner as well. So, look, there's the MPF logo on the window. Yeah, so, collecting British photography books is very important to us here. And having a very good library of not only those, but magazines as well. We've got a lot of the Don McCullin spreads in the Sunday Times. We got the first fashion pictures in things like ID. We got the first issues of them. We've got punk fanzines. We've got a whole lot of stuff that relates to the history of photography in this country.
When you pick up a book that particularly or especially excites you, what is it about it that does that for you?
Hang on, I'm just giving sort of volume. I guess, a good book is where, you've got to have good pictures, and then you've got to arrange it and produce it in a way that sort of echoes that what's going on in that book. and it doesn't take me long. It takes me maybe 15 seconds to look at a book and decide if it's interesting. When I'm looking at a book that I really like, I'm seeing something I hadn't really seen before, way of looking, part of life. The problem is with most of the books that I get to see, they're generic. They're of the type. They're sort of copies of other photographers that have come before us. You recognize the imagery. You recognize what they were trying to do. It's when you're thrown by that process that it becomes interesting.
Which is a challenge when you're looking at your own work because you're so familiar with it. So how do you sort of create that? How do you create that jolt so that you're doing what you want to achieve when you pick up someone else's book?
Well, I'm my biggest critic.
Oh, we all
I
are.
can see the faults in my pictures much easier than anyone else, I would say.
Even when it comes to the design of a book.
Well, yeah, I've done some bad designs. I mean, I've done over 100 books, and obviously they're not all brilliant. But, I can pick out half a dozen to 10 that I think really have worked. But I also make bad books too. How about that as an admission?
So what are sort of the takeaways? What's the Martin Parr lesson that you go, these are sort of the essential things, other than the good photographs, that are essential for me to be able to produce the best book that I can?
I mean, I've done books where, I did a book called Plias, where the design of the book was so bad that it became interesting again. We purposely made the printing bad, the design bad. So, yeah, sometimes things like that happen. But I guess for me, interestingly, the book that just keeps on going is The Last Resort. It must be on its 6th or 7th edition now, and it still sells a lot every year. And the same is Small World. They're the two main projects that people come back to with me. And I keep up, well, I don't update The Last Resort, but I certainly update the Small World book and keep it up to date and put new pictures in. We've just done a new edition that came out in January. And we put new pictures in, rejigged it, put a new picture on the cover. So every edition has a different picture on the cover, which is interesting because it means you can see how they've progressed over the years.
And tell me about the choice to revisit it with each edition rather than just doing a reissue.
Well, we don't always put new pictures in, but I went back to Darry Lewis, my publisher of this book, and said I'd like to have another 12 pages, another 12 images in, and he agreed to that. So I was able to put in pictures that I'd taken quite recently, and a few that I discovered from the past that I thought had been missed out.
And what do you think is the appeal of those two books, that there's such great interest even after their initial run?
God, it's not up to me to say, really, is it? I mean, I guess and hope that people appreciate the photography in them. I can't answer that. That's an unfair question. I'm not going to say, yes, I'm brilliant. You're not talking to an American here now, I'm English. We believe in...
Point taken.
We believe in understatement.
Point taken. One of the things that I like, talking to photographers about, especially who've had as extensive a career as you, is retaining the joy in making the photographs. And there's so many that I've talked to still sort of retain that sort of childlike sensibility. Talk to Douglas Kirkland and Joel Meyerowitz and others. How important is that, maintaining, that joy of discovery and image making to you?
Yeah, I agree with that statement. It comes automatically to me. When I'm at a new event, I get excited and I want to record it. I want to get that excitement that I see and experience into an image. And so I can pass on, if you like, my observations, what I've learned, what I've been doing in these pictures to other people. It's about communication. It's about me passing on the quality of the connection you've made with the subject matter. I keep coming back to this as a statement because I believe it's so important.
Well, my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore. And it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that one photographer be and why?
Okay, well, I guess I would. Have you heard of Stephen Gill?
Yeah.
He's quite famous here. He came from Bristol. I know him very well. We have a lot of his prints in the library here. We've collected them over the years. We have book dummies, and I guess I'd recommend him. He's ridiculously underappreciated.
Well, thank you for sharing him, his name, and your work.
Okay, been a pleasure. I enjoyed speaking to you.
Thanks to Martin for joining us. You can learn more about Martin and his work by visiting martinparrfoundation.com. And if you're a fan of our work, you can write reviews on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts and share a favorite episode on social networks, be it X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Remember to use the hashtag #TheCandidFrame. You can also support us financially via Patreon. And if you want to make a one-time donation to the show, you can do so by visiting buymeacoffee.com/TheCandidFrame. Thanks to Bruce Harmon and William Verbeek for their recent contributions. We've relaunched our newsletter using Substack. By subscribing, you receive essays from me as well as updates on everything related to TCF. Substack is a wonderful photographic community, and I hope you'll join us by signing up today. And if you can't find every episode of the show on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts, download the Candid Frame app, available for Apple iOS and Android. And because of your generosity, it's free to download and use. No additional purchases are required. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. And the show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker. And this is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame.